Alright, so next thing I want to check is injector pulse. I assume we don't have any, but brown and red wire is the control wire for injector number 1. So it's a power feed and then 4 control wires and this plug going into under the valve cover. So that's going to be channel 3. Channel 1 is still crank. Channel 2 is still cam at the engine computer. Alright, here we go. See what happens. Do we see anything interesting on the green trace? Well, 2.3 volts. How does that make any sense? I'm guessing the injector driver module, so these are the fuel pump injectors, the diesel direct fuel injection engine control module, that I'm sure sends out power and ground when it needs to. Right there, brown and yellow. So this is not the engine computer, I don't think. It only has 60 pins. Well, no, it is. That's just the one connector. So, I don't know. See no activity. Good crank, good cam sensor signal. Blows my mind. Timing is perfect mechanically. And let's see what code we're setting here again. Let's log back in. So we still only have P0341 camshaft position sensor circuit range performance. Also, I don't know if these globe plug circuits matter. Cylinder 1, 3, and 4. I don't know if it has bad globe plugs. So strange. Alright, so looking at some live data: engine speed, injection quality, torsion value, intake air temp, coolant temp. Okay. So, wait a second. See, do we see anything? Ooh, what's this? Look, we're seeing injector pulse width here. We didn't see that before. This was after clearing the codes. Okay. Well, that's promising. If we have injector pulse width, this thing should fire up and run if we have fuel pressure. Do we have fuel pressure? What changed here? Let's read fault codes one more time. So I don't know why it's setting to 341. All data does not have a description or testing procedures for this code, which is insane. Globe plug cylinder 1 and cylinder 3 open circuit. Okay. But look at that. We have injector pulse width. We can put a current clamp on the feed wire and then see, when this injector is firing, because the feed is common, so it's going to see, buzzing. One, two, three, four. Now, something's not quite. Something doesn't make sense. When does this thing repeat? Does it repeat every cam revolution? So watch this pulse on the cam. This is a flat line, and right here it's shifted way over. We have 4 pulses there, and then only 1, 2 there, 4 there, 1, 2 there. So what is it trying to do? 1, 2, 3, 4 space, and then only 2, a little spike there, then 4, then 2, then 4. So I guess that's repeatable. Okay, we're getting somewhere, but we're still not all the way there. Alright, so this is the tandem pump, and this bleed plug is actually pretty easy to get to. Let's undo that and see if fuel shoots out of there. This is on the low pressure side. You want to crank it over?
Yep.
Okay, so got the fuel pressure gauge hooked up to the test port. Hopefully it won't leak too much. SUR&R kit with like 10 adapters. Let's crank it. We'll roll the scope while we're here. Look at our fuel pressure. 15 psi, that's it. That's not enough. So I'm gonna make sure there's no leaks. And it's dripping pretty bad. So let me try to tighten this up first. Alright, here we go again. About 20 psi, and we can try to squirt out the excess. See, now there's no injector pulse, so I'm sure, I think we have to clear the codes to get injector pulse back. All right, here we go again. Nope, no injector pulse. We're not going above 20 psi. Purge it again. Not too much leakage out there?
No, I don't see anything.
Okay, good. Alright, so now I gotta add another channel on injector number 2. And let's crank it over one more time. PSI. I don't think 20 PSI is going to cut it. Well, so here's injector 1 and injector 2. You can see they're kind of trading spots. Here, injector 1 has 2, I guess, events. And here, injector 2 has 2 events. So, mechanical timing's on the money. Injectors are working. This 341 code, that could be a red herring. It could possibly set if you're just cranking too long and it doesn't fire up. And you're like, hey, we're expecting a faster signal. I don't know because I don't have the code description for it. It's crazy. Fuel pressure. We have the original pump from this car that has 250,000 miles on it. And the pump, you know, the high, not the high pressure, but the tandem pump that came from the loaner car had like 300,000 miles on it. So we've seen this before where, you know, car's running fine, goes to the shop, and then either it doesn't start at all or runs for a few miles and then craps out and the pump is bad. So not hard to do. We can swap out this pump, see what the fuel pressure is. We know it's 20 psi right now, which isn't very good. I don't see anything else wrong with this Volkswagen. Alright, we're all plumbed in with the new high pressure pump. Let's give it a whirl. Now this is going to be empty, so we're going to have to probably just crank it and hold that button down. Alright, so I got diesel coming out of there, so that should be bled out. 15 to 20 psi, our injector pulse is fine. Definitely have flow. What does this thing need? I'm wondering if the low pressure pump is working. Alright, we've got the battery maintainer 13.6. Crank it right now. Okay, so it's going over 20, kind of bouncing around. I'm going to bleed it out a little more. Hey, look, we actually had injection duration specified. Injection quantity was going up. We definitely had injector pulse during that crank. I'm just on the number 1 injector. It's doing its thing. Should be working. So just for kicks, I unplugged the camshaft sensor completely to see if there's any change in the injectors or the codes. We have a different code, P3007, camshaft position sensor, no signal. Okay, and check this out. The injectors are still firing in exactly the same way. We have the 4 pulses there, and then the 2 with the 2 missing ones. This is an injector number 1. So nothing changed with the injector firing pattern or order. So it doesn't like something about this camshaft position sensor signal, but what could it be? We know the sprocket's right, we know the timing is right. It just blows my mind. So there's no cam signal right now, and it's still firing the injectors on every crank revolution just from the CKP. Exactly the same way. So maybe it's trying to start, but it doesn't cough, it doesn't do anything. We could probe the feed wire to see if the injector is actually opening. Let's do that, and then we'll chase the 341 code. There's nothing on Google to help us this time. Alright, so I added channel 4 to the common brown and yellow wire. I assume that's the power feed, or the high side driver for the injectors. So now in the scope, let's crank it over. Okay. Let's see if the injector is actually doing anything. Let's move these out of the way. So yellow is the high side, and the green is the low side. Yes, so whenever the yellow is high and the green is low, then we have current going through the injector, and it should be pulsing. So you can see right here, we had pulse, pulse, and then here, no pulsing at all. Does that make any sense? And we know that there's 2 sync notches per crank revolution, Okay. So it fired, you know, let's say at 0 degrees, this is 360. That would make sense. I don't know what the synchronization here is, but here it didn't fire the injectors at all. This is just based on the crank sensor. So now let's plug in the cam sensor, clear the codes out, and see if anything changes at all. I'm going to save all these waveforms. Alright, now the cam sensor is plugged back in. Crank it. See how long it took for the injectors to turn on? And I'm sure we're going to see the exact same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. There's our cam signal. So for one revolution of the crank, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sync notches. Just 2 revolutions of the crank, 1 of the cam. I wish I'd have known good. Waveform. But you can see nothing changed with the injectors at all. It fires there. And I'm sure now we set a 341 instead of a 3007. Let's see here, ECM. Like I said, I've never seen a crank with 2 sync notches before. But then again, the other VW did have 2 sync notches per crank revolution. Oh, let's see, key on. Alright, so something else to try is to shift this camera around, see if anything changes. The codes, the injector pulse, something. So the original cam, we see that the bolt is shifted to the right, so the cam is actually advanced, right? Advanced with respect to the sprocket. So crank the engine over. Now we have no trouble codes relating to the camshaft, but we have no injector pulse. I can't make this stuff up. Let's try again. Read DTCs. Just glow plug codes. But no injector pulse. That's unbelievable. We can try shifting the cam the other way, see what happens. Alright, so now I unplugged the cam sensor altogether. Let's see if our injector pulse comes back. And if we set any codes. Okay. Yes, so that's repeatable. We're definitely dealing with some kind of problem with this cam signal. Timing, or maybe it's inverted because the sensor is replaced, but the original sensor didn't work either. So we're getting close, but we're still not quite there. Let's check for codes. Okay, so that's repeatable. P3007, camshaft position sensor, no signal. Let's plug it back in, crank it over one more time after we clear the codes out. Alright, cam sensor's plugged back in. No injector pulse. We're still at 20 psi, so not worried about fuel pressure. I'm sure it didn't set any cam codes. I'm sure it's probably just glow plug codes. And now after that long crank, we set a P3008 camshaft position sensor signal outside tolerance. Unbelievable. So how exact does this have to be? Alright, so now the camshaft is a few degrees retarded from the middle point. Let's see what happens. Okay, stop that. Key back on. This car's really blowing my mind. Back to the 341. Not the 3008. The injectors are doing the exact same thing they were doing before, and now the cam is occurring a little later, right over the sync pulse. Maybe you can retard it just a hair more, go to the limit, see if anything changes, but man, this thing is really, really picky. Alright, cam is now fully retarded. Let's see what happens. That poor starter. Got more miles on it now. Same exact thing with the injector, so they're still firing. You can see we're, well, later than the sync notch now. Now we're over the sync notch with the fat pulse. Okay. Let's see what code we set. Still 341. Okay, interesting. Alright, so looking at these waveforms when we're retarding and advancing the camshaft. So when we're advanced, we had no injector pulse and it said P3008. We're like way off. You see these pulses, I think, are supposed to be right over the sync notches. So let's go to, this is full retard, and here we're pretty darn close, but you can see the cam is a little to the right, and like this pulse isn't quite over the sync notch. Still setting a 341. So whenever you're close, it sets a 341. Whenever you're really far off, it'll set a 3008, I believe. So we just want to advance it a hair, so all of the sync notches are within the cam pulses. So I just did that. Here we go. Okay. Key off. Let's see where we are. Still exact same thing with injectors. So now all of the notches are exactly, or very close to, the sync pulse. Extremely close. Okay. Now maybe Volkswagen wants it to be, rising edge with rising edge, like really close, because every time we shift these, it'll jump at least one tooth on the crank signal, which is, quite a few degrees. Let's see what code set here. Yep, still 341, still same injector pattern. This has to be the issue. Let's try again. Advanced it just a hair more. that sync notch is basically all the way in the middle. I don't know what else it wants to see. Maybe the rising edge needs to be in the middle of the sync notch, perhaps. But we'll keep going in little steps so we don't overshoot it. But at the same time, I'm surprised because I think there has to be some tolerance here. Let's see, read DTC. I'm sure it's going to be 341 again. Yep. Clear it out. Back out. Alright, yet again, slightly advanced. Roll the scope. Ready? Every time I think it just might start, but it's not even coughing or doing anything at all. Still 341. Let's see where we are on our sync. Oh, it's almost, well, yeah, transition's in the middle now. The rising edge is in the middle of this long pulse. And what we started with, before we started messing with the cam sprocket, was the transition here was in the middle of this low section. Now we're a little to the right, so just slightly retarded. I mean, there has to be the tolerance. One more bump and it'll be pretty much here or here. I'm really not sure what it's looking for. I wish we had a known good from this exact car. Well, a crazy turn of events. I was at the end of my rope. I called my lifeline, Keith the Guru Defazio. He's in North Carolina. He answered the call, and then he's like, well, I know someone who is a specialist in these Volkswagens, knows them inside and out. So he connected me to Chris Martino and then Jans Jorgensen, who apparently lives and breathes these Volkswagens. And he sent me a known good waveform. Let's see what that looks like. So this is a known good waveform. See where the sync notches are? They're nowhere near these pulses. Nowhere near. We're way, way off, timing wise. How is that possible? This right here is our waveform, and we've shifted the cam back and forth, line it up here, line it up here. Nope, that's not correct. We're looking for this. It's like somewhere in the middle. That's a known good running car. So what gives? We checked the cam gear, the reluctor wheels, the mechanical timing is spot on the money. It has good compression. Everything's great. What about the crank sync notch? Where does that come from? Well, I thought it was the end of the crank was magnetized and had a little, a magnetic strip. The sensor is looking right at the end of the crankshaft. However, this is Volkswagen and there are variables. So Jans, he said, was the rear main seal replaced? I'm like, well, I don't know. They put a flywheel on it, so I asked the shop owner. Sure enough, the rear main seal was replaced. What does that mean? Well, this rear main seal is not your ordinary rear main seal. You have to have a special tool to time the rear main seal, because apparently it's a two-piece seal. There's a ring that gets pressed onto the end of the crank, and then it's basically this. This is the old one that they pulled off. There's the crank sensor. It looks at this, and this gets pressed onto the end of the crank. And this has the little magnetic whatever pieces on it, I'm guessing, because this one has, looks like little actual teeth. But regardless, if you just press this on wherever the engine's at, your timing of the crank pulses are just going to be random. They're going to be off. That's the entire problem with this Volkswagen. The rear main seal was installed improperly. It wasn't timed correctly to the crankshaft. Mind completely blown. We've been here over 6 hours. I've been on the phone for almost an hour. So, just when you think you've seen it all, you see something like this, and it just completely blows your mind. So thank goodness that people like Keith and Jans and Chris Martino and the community of support is something that I'm really humbled by. So a huge shout out to those guys. I would have been here for days if it wasn't for them. Rear main seal. I mean, so the guy's got to pull the transmission off again. Actually, it wasn't the shop owner who did this work. It was his buddy just using his shop. So fun times ahead. But that's where we are. Once the Volkswagen's running, I'll probably do a follow-up, maybe do a live chat about it. I don't know what to say. How would you charge for this? 6 hours, 5 hours of diagnostics? It's like, I don't know, plus travel time. I spent almost a whole day here. I have like more cars to do, but you can't give up because this car's been down for like 4 years. They want to get it going. So that's it for this one. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.